Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for coming along to this, the second of bacta's webinar series this spring. The first one last Thursday on Brexit was a great success for those of you who came along. I hope you agree. We've got a good conversation going about that, and I'm sure today's will be just as interesting. We've got an hour, 10:30 to 11:30. It don't necessarily have to take an hour. It's members on the call, no non-members are on the call. So if there isn't any further questions or you haven't got any further comments, I won't stretch it to a full hour, but I fully expect that there will be plenty to talk about. With me on the webinar this morning, two gentlemen who really don't need any introduction at all. James Miller, our National President, who's really dressed and spruced himself up for the occasion. I hope everybody appreciates that. And Greg Wood, who's put a tie on, our National Vice President. You have met them many, many times, both in person, I'm sure, and obviously through all the various Zoom meetings that we've been holding over the course of the past terrible 12 months. Well, of course, alongside COVID and all of the many issues we're having to deal with in relation to that particular issue, of course, the government stroke Gambling Commission has launched a review of the Gambling Act, perhaps the most major review of gambling legislation in this country since 2005, when the new Gambling Act came into effect. It's a great opportunity, definitely a great opportunity for us to make some changes to the legislation in the way that we want, but I think we have to be conscious of the fact that most of the focus will be online. And I suspect much of the media debate and the political debate will be about that. We sent round a short executive summary of the points that we're going to make in relation to our submission to the review process. I hope you had an opportunity to look at that, and I know some of you have requested a copy of our full draft document. We're on version 2.3 at the moment. There will be more changes to come, more adding evidence rather than changing the fundamentals. And next Wednesday, we have a National Council which will sign off on the final document. What we're going to do today is just by way of introduction, go through the kind of approach in headline form. We'll have a couple of words from James and from Greg, and then really I want the whole of this webinar to be dedicated to members asking us questions about the approach that we've taken. And if they've got any brilliant ideas, please do feed them in. As I say, we have an opportunity next week to discuss them at National Council. If you do want to make a comment or ask a question, at the bottom right hand of your screen, if you're on a laptop or a computer, it may be elsewhere on a tablet, I'm not entirely sure, there is a little button, Q&A. I can see somebody's already clicked on that. Let's have a look, see what that works, and we can ask a question. And I'm going to read this out because it is quite funny. It's from Jason Frost, who says, "Can we all please have a whip round and pay for Greg to get out of jail?" Thank you, Jason. Marvellous question, but back to being a bit more serious. Yeah, as I say, I'm going to just do a little bit of an introduction to the approach that bacta has taken, and then Greg and James will say a few words before it's over to you. That question and answer button down on the right hand side of your screen allows you to ask any questions that you like, and we'll try to endeavour to answer those on the webinar. If we don't get through all the questions, we'll follow them up afterwards. And by the way, this whole webinar is being recorded, so if anybody wants to come back and look at any part of it in the future, they can do so, and we'll send around the link just as soon as we've come off this particular event. So for those of you who have looked at the executive summary, you'll know that there is a broad underpinning philosophy to what we've said. And that philosophy has been formulated because we appreciate that this whole review is taking place in a rather toxic atmosphere for gambling. And the tenor and thrust of the consultation document is one where the government seems to be looking much more at restriction than letting new developments or new innovations to come forward. And we have to recognise that, and we have to be very careful, we think, in striking the right balance between saying these are things that you can do, these are the things that we want, but not appearing to be overzealous in our demands, given that particular atmosphere. So the approach that we're taking is to basically say, look, change things within the Act that really do need changing. So make things legal, but do not necessarily allow them to become embedded in the marketplace until we've had an opportunity to test and trial these things. And you can then, whether it's the Secretary of State or the Gambling Commission, give us the green light to then roll that out into the marketplace on the basis of good, real evidence rather than speculation. So, for example, one of our requests is for a small change to a statutory instrument which currently prohibits the use of debit cards and credit cards on machines. We're suggesting, from a legal point of view, that all you should do, government, is remove the phrase debit cards and the associated definition from that statutory instrument. That would then make it legal for debit cards, wearables, Apple Pays to be used directly on machines. What we're then saying is, well, that's legal. So now we can go out and we can test that, and we can ensure that the product does not heighten the risk of any gambling related harm. It will allow us to actually meet customer expectations about what they want, how they want to pay for their games on the machines. I mean, let's remember, we are the only industry that I know of that is told it can't use a debit card to pay for the things that it offers, which is utterly bizarre in this modern world. But in the past, we've been unable to provide the evidence to persuade the Commission or the government that these things can be done, because they say, where's the evidence that it's safe? We say, well, we can't give you that evidence because it's illegal. And they say, well, without the evidence, we can't sanction it. So we're caught in this catch-22. So this two-stage approach that underpins what we're saying gets around that problem. It says you make it legal. We then have the ability to test and get good evidence. And if that evidence is fine, we can then roll it out to the marketplace. So that's the sort of underlying philosophy that we have in everything that we've said. And to cement that going forward, we're also putting right top of our list the fact that there should be a statutory obligation, and this would be new, a statutory obligation on the Secretary of State to conduct a formal review of gambling regulation in this country at least every 3 years. So we'll have a regular drumbeat of reviews, not just of stakes and prizes, but the way in which regulation's working, innovative ideas that have come forward, proposals for new machines, for example, could all be captured in this regular process of review. And that would give us some certainty that we're actually going to move forward with regular innovations that will satisfy our customers and not have to wait every generation for some great public outcry about gambling to build up and then some demands for the legislation to change. It will, in our view anyway, dampen down the kind of the toxicity around gambling and provide a regular, as I say, drumbeat of change that will come through all sectors of the industry for the benefit of our players and for the industry itself. So with that in mind, we've also come up with some other direct proposals that we think we could achieve now, which would sit within that philosophy. And again, they're outlined in the executive summary if you've had an opportunity to look at it. So I've mentioned payment methods. We should be able to give customers the full range of payment methods. They choose how they want to pay. They choose to pay for their Mars bars. They're have a full range of payment methods to use. If they want to, we should be the same. I've talked about that. We also are asking for another legislative change in that we are asking for the Secretary of State to be given the power to subdivide Category C machines. And currently, as you'll know, the Secretary of State has the power to subdivide Category B machines, and we have B1s, 2s, 3As and 4s. And there are different categories of Category D machines. So, I mean, it's almost de facto been subdivided, but we don't have that facility with Category C, and that should change. And the reasoning behind this was because, for those of you who can cast their minds back about 5 or 6 years, we spoke to the Gambling Commission about creating a pub machine, really about, really thinking about what comes after the SWP. And we thought, well, actually, do you know, a kind of long play, very soft gaming machine, completely different to a fruit machine, actually might be something that consumers liked in the pub market. And what we found was that the Commission had a sort of an interest in that, but said, if you were to have a statutory maximum stake of £10, for example, which you would need to do if this game was going to work as a multi-participant game, soft gambling, long game time, all that would happen is that we would have to change the law and it would apply to all category C machines. So you'd have a £10 category C fruit machine in the pub, and that was not acceptable. So how do we get around that? Well, we give the Secretary of State the power to subdivide category C, and then we can go to the Secretary of State with proposals for new pub machines. And you may recall that we did this in our last review in relation to a category B5 machine. And we thought that here's this product that I've just described. When we first originally spoke about it, it was for the pub market, but we thought last time round, we'll try this as a basically an AGC product. And again, the Commission was showing some interest in it. For a whole bunch of reasons, they weren't prepared to sanction it last time round, mainly because they were cutting stakes down to £2 on FOPTs. But we have an opportunity to go back as once this review has sort of been concluded and these changes have been made, to go back with all sorts of proposals for new innovations across the full range of categories of machines. We're also looking at a small change in a part of the Act that says that you're not allowed to link machines in a venue other than a casino. And this means that you won't be able to provide these sort of, what we'd like to do, certainly in an AGC, is provide a sort of what we're calling an enhanced community feature. It's basically just amongst friends, just providing another way to win a prize. So, you know, as it would do in a casino, you take a small portion of the stake, you drop it into a pot, and it builds up and it drops at random up to the maximum statutory prize, which I think would mean that it's perfectly acceptable to Gambling Commission and legislators. And then that just gives us another way in which we can please our customers and give them enjoyment and some theatre in the arcade. And indeed, we could do it elsewhere as well in pubs. And we've just amended the document to allow that to be part of our proposal. And finally, just wanted to talk about the other thing that we would like to see changed, which is in relation to pubs and clubs. Currently, you've got statutory maximum numbers of machines, automatic entitlements. Why on earth this has all been embedded in detailed parts of the 2005 Act is beyond me. I think it's probably just an anachronism that's been held over from the 68 Act. If you're entitled to 2 machines in a pub, for example, then you're entitled to 2 machines in a pub. Why do you need to be sending off fees and notifications to local councils? And by the way, actually 2's not quite enough. We've done a survey and we found that a good chunk of pubs out there have got 4 machines in there, and that should be the automatic entitlement, because that's what the pub wants, that's what the customer wants, and that's what our operator members can supply. Why on earth do we have to keep going through some ludicrous bureaucracy with local authorities to say, well, you know, this is what we've got, we've met our entitlement, and when we change it, we again have to tell you we've swapped out a Cat C for a Cat D. All of that is ludicrous bureaucracy. And we've explained all of that, and we've given the costs, and hopefully there'll be some changes on that. Now, before I bring in Greg and James for a couple of observations, you'll see also that we've answered a couple of other questions, sort of more general points about the Ombudsman and about a levy and about the Gambling Commission's powers. Just very, very briefly on those, because I'm obviously prepared to take questions on all of that, but I suspect they'll be of less interest than some of the industry-specific things. But on the Ombudsman, we're saying we are not persuaded that the current alternative dispute resolution system is broken, and we provided plenty of evidence on that. So why would you want to introduce a sort of statutory Ombudsman with all the cost and bureaucracy associated with that? Similarly, in relation to the levy, again, who's saying it's broken? I mean, it is generating funds. GambleAware can't spend all the money that they've been given. They get money from fines. Really, it just feels almost like it's a way in which certain stakeholders wish to punish the industry. and generate another tax. There is no need, in our view, to create a new levy if the existing levy system is working and providing funds. But, and this is a big but, because I think this is one of the things that may well come forward as a proposal, if you do come forward with a proposal for a statutory levy, you have to make sure it's smart. Why should society lotteries or seaside arcades, for example, have to pay the same percentage of their GGY as operators of spread betting websites? It would be totally unfair and unreasonable when you try to sort of apportion the levy income on the basis of potential harms that may be caused. So we've opposed that. And we've also said in relation to the powers of the Gambling Commission that we think they do already have enough power. They might not have enough resource, but they certainly have enough power. And they have not, in our view, exercised that power sufficiently well in relation to certain of their functions, and in particular in relation to crime. And I know this has been a big discussion at the recent round of division meetings. We certainly don't feel that the Commission has taken enough prosecutions in our sector. In fact, it's been rather lax in doing so. The classic tale, and we've heard this many times, of the illegal operator putting machines out there in single sites, often illegally sited machines, is highlighted to the Commission, and they send the operator a letter inviting him to get a permit, get an operating license, and the machine's permitted. That frankly is not good enough, and we've made that point quite strongly in our response to the questions. And very finally, because I know this will be of a lot of interest to people given the debates that we've had over the course of the past year, there were specific questions in relation to real-based category D fruit machines and their accessibility to people under the age of 18. The questions were more about, could you please provide some evidence about this, rather than making proposals about what they wish to do. And for those of you who have seen our full document, you will see oodles and oodles of evidence to say, why are you even asking these questions? You know, bacta has taken a precautionary approach, listened to concerns that have been expressed, and in relation to cash payout real-based machines, CAT-Ds, there is a no under 18 rule coming into force at the end of this month. And we've explained how they are completely different to other types of category D real-based fruit machines that are paying out tickets or non-monetary prizes. And I hope that when that evidence is looked at with an objective eye, that issue will just be put to bed for another generation, if not beyond. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to put in. Be very, very interested to get members' responses. But before I do, I just want to give the opportunity to James and Greg to just offer a couple of comments on the review in general. So James, if you wouldn't mind just giving us your thoughts on it. You're on mute at the moment, James.
You'd think I'd have the hang of this Zoom thing by now. We've been doing it for over a year. Apologies. Thank you, John, and good morning, everybody. Yes, interesting times we are all in the middle of COVID to be having a gambling review. Seems quite surreal, but here we are. All of the conversations we've had leading up to this with many senior politicians and government advisors all clearly indicate this is going to be a restrictive review. And you can see that from the problems in the social media and in other areas across the spectrum where gambling harms have become more prevalent and the concern and measures need to be required. So the advertising is a key area, football sponsorship, all of these lead to questions about the normalisation of gambling, and they're all areas that need to be looked at. And I think that the key thing from all of this we learn, we continually hear that the 2005 Act was an analogue act in a digital age. And if you need to learn from the past, it's quite clear that gambling legislation needs to be more flexible to reflect the changing needs of society and consumer demands and to protect and minimise harms. So we're asking for this a more ongoing, flexible and comprehensive approach to gambling legislation altogether. And to ensure that the industry needs to is safe and is sustainable for all, and the government should learn from the problems with regards to FOB-T's, the stake reduction and the drawn-out debacle over that, and be able to act where it's required more quickly. The reason not in restricting the use of credit cards for betting online, for instance, it just takes too long. So I think it's not just a case of stakes and prizes, but all aspects that can be dealt with under a delegated authority that is evidence-led, that we can engage with the Commission. We've built a much better relationship with DSMS and the Commission over recent years. And we understand that, you know, for the majority of people, playing machines is an enjoyable leisure process, and we need to ensure that it's safe and sustainable. The industry is allowed to innovate and introduce new products. John mentioned offering customers a choice of payment method, and I think that's key. It's clear the demise of cash continues, and COVID has only accelerated that. And I dare say other points will come up along the way, you know, but we are a sector that we can't increase our prices, and we're restricted from payment methods. And in the modern day, how can an industry expect to survive when it's got restrictions such as this? So I think we're calling on all members to engage and find out what is a safe and sustainable path for the industry to progress to the future. Greg, did you want to come in?
Yes, I will. Thank you, James. Good morning, everybody. And I think, you know, John and James have made some very good points about the review and how we need to kind of deal with the problems that exist and the restrictions we're going to have right now in getting changes through, because I think it will be restrictive. And if we did ask for stuff straight away, I just don't think we'd get it, would be turned down. So I think it's all about looking to the future and building the legislation around how we want to move the whole industry forward, what we can look to build into the Act or ask to be built into the Act, so that as we do move through this, through the next 10, 20 years that this Act will last, that we can, you know, improve the industry, bring new products, look at new payment methods. You know, cards at the start, there's all kinds of other ways we could look at payments as we go forwards. There's new products that the manufacturers might want to bring into the market. And we don't want to be stuck with a confining act that allows us to do the few things that we can think about now, but not allow us to develop that on as we move forward through the years. So I think it's really important that we push this through. And I think one of the key things is ensuring that we've got this, trying to get the ability for us to have a legislation in place that enforces a review of the regulations, so that we're not sitting there asking and nothing happening. So, you know, we're going to try and we're going to ask for a mechanism to be in place that will allow us to trigger that, so that it has to happen. We may not get anything, but at least the process is done. So I think from my perspective, that it's moving to the future and moving things along, and how we can make sure that this Act is fit for purpose as we go forward, and the Commission can react and act in a way that benefits us and allows us to innovate and improve what we've got, not just from our own perspective in terms of the products, but also player safety, because, you know, we need to make sure that what we're introducing as new products are safe, and that the players can use them in a safe way, and that we can demonstrate that to the Commission. Because if we can't do that, we really won't get anywhere. But yeah, I think that's about me. You guys have summed everything up.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Greg. And I think that last point you made, Greg, is a really important one about player safety. And this is clearly the Gambling Commission's mantra and the government's mantra now. We have to demonstrate the safety of any product or innovation that we bring in, hence the two-stage approach, so that we can actually put things in the marketplace and test them for real and get good evidence on that. But yes, safety is absolutely crucial. And in relation to our cashless payment proposals, we've looked at introducing some additional social responsibility measures that would give some reassurance to the Commission that this is going to be safe. I mean, we've obviously got loads of things in place already, and as a land-based sector, we've got human beings, staff that are always there to make sure that players and customers are looked after. But the Commission has been indicating to us we need to go more. Go further, so that's what we'll do. It's the sort of things that you'll see in our toolkits. It's the sort of thing that exists on the GPT app. You know, all of these kinds of things are going to give reassurance that that particular change is something which is safe. Anyway, look, it's over to you guys out there. And by the way, we can't see you. We're in this bizarre position of talking to screens, but we know that there's approaching 100 members out there. Please don't all ask a question because we'll never get through them. But please do put some questions to us, and we'll do our best to answer them. Funnily enough, the first one I've had has got nothing to do with the review, but I will answer it because a number of other people have approached me about this. It's in relation to the super deduction that the Chancellor announced in the budget last week. Do machines qualify? Well, it's difficult to answer that question because the absolute detail of the legislation is not yet gone through Parliament. It will be part of the finance bill. But having had a good look at what is a quite complicated set of clauses that already exist, my best advice is talk to an accountant about it. As far as I can see, if it was plant and machinery before, it's going to be plant and machinery again. But I really do recommend getting an accountant to go through the fine print of all of that. Hopefully it will be machines, and that will be certainly a very helpful measure for us. Anyway, look, that's nothing to do with the review. If I come back to this particular topic, one was a couple of questions I think about cashless. I mean, one was about evidence. Greg, can I put this to you? Have we got any evidence from anywhere else in the world about the use of non-cash forms of payment on gaming machines and the consequences, implications and reactions to that?
There's very little evidence, I think, around the direct use of debit cards on gaming machines. I think I'm not aware of any jurisdictions in Europe that allow it directly on the machine. As such, there is no evidence. I think there are situations where we have the third-party proxy system, which we see in the UK. But other than that, I think there isn't any.
No, that's my understanding too, Greg. And I think if Jason, who's, you know, Jason Frost is president of Euromat, if he has been keeping an eye on this, if we're saying anything wrong, Jason, please do just stick a note in the Q&A section there. James, I mean, you've been involved in non-cash forms of payment for a long time. What have you seen sort of on let's say the non-gaming product? Has there been any concerns about that around the world, or has it just been part of the trend towards or trend away from cash use?
Well, I think that's the two separate sectors really, because cashless amusement machines and FECs have been operated widely around the world for many years. Even before I started getting involved with it, card systems have been in place in quite every other country, you know, so that's quite different. I think just coming back to the original question, which came from Jason Slater, thank you, Jason. I think that the subject of cashless or choice of payment, electronic payment on gaming machines is new area, and it was bubbling along before the COVID crisis due to the demise of cash, and there was some reprehension as to what measures could be put in place to allay any concerns. And I think COVID has accelerated that, not only for the demise of cash, but also the handling of cash and banknotes as an increased risk of transmission, etc. And we saw a lot of shops and premises saying card payment only. Obviously cash is expensive to process for a lot of these, so it was a benefit at a time of reduced income to introduce such a measure. So I think that it is so new, and it's been accelerated by COVID. As Greg said, the third-party apps are an ideal platform because they integrally include the social responsible measures, additional robust social responsible measures to allay any such concerns. And what we're trying to do with non-app based or e-wallet based payments is to follow those same sort of measures in a robust way to work with people so they can understand that there is no increased risk of harm by offering a choice of payment. I mean, you could say alcoholism, for instance. You can go to a bar and you can buy a large double on card or cash. You know, there's no concern about the addiction elements there because there are robust measures in place regards licensing for the harms. So I think we just need to follow that process and just help people understand that this can be achieved safely and responsibly.
Yeah. Do you think, both of you, that the way in which the question around non-cash forms of payment was phrased in the consultation document, that there is a predisposition to allowing that to happen, subject to just the conditions around player safety? James?
Yes, I would say initially, John, you and I have had many conversations, and I'm probably one of the first people within bacta to raise cashless payments many years ago. I'm sure you recall that. And we've been with MPs and luncheons and different meetings, and we've raised it. And they do have this conception that it could be a contributor to further gambling harms automatically, and we need to address that. And ironically, it's a direct contrast to when you look at online, which is all electronic payments, even with credit cards, but the level of harm that's been created by that is substantially more an increase than you would see from offering a secure limit or a transaction limit on a fruit machine in a pub, say. You know, and I think that the previous issues have amplified uncertainty in this area, and we just have to engage with people, have a level conversation, and demonstrate the robust measures in place, and be able to test it and to demonstrate that it's not a problem.
Yeah.
We have to manage it to ensure it doesn't become a problem. Absolutely. Unlike the problems that we've seen in the past with FOBTs and online gaming with credit cards.
Absolutely. Just changing the subject, we've had a question here from Will Bollum, and it's a question that I've had from many other people, as I know you have in the membership, and that's about, do we think that the bookmakers will be asking for more machines, and more generally, what do you think their approach to the gambling review will be? I've got some contacts, obviously, but I'll be interested, Greg, in just getting your view before I speak on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that they would be, for them to go and ask for additional machines or any exclusivity on any product, I think would be very brazen, given the situation that we're in, the political situation that we're in with gambling. I don't think we've heard anything solid around them asking for additional machines or an extra category of machine strictly for their own use, from what we've spoken about. So I think, you know, you can't rule it out. They could always put these asks in. I think at this point in time, the Commission and DCMS would be very hard for them to justify doing that, given that they're going to look to restrict online, and the issue around the B2 and the stake reduction that we've seen. I think for them to then go and say, oh yeah, you have some more machines or have another product with an increased stake, would be politically very hard for them to justify.
You have the same view, James? Yeah, I saw you nodding there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we said from the start, all indications it's going to be a restrictive review, and the bookmakers, especially, as we've all seen, they're on a damage limitation exercise here. They're spending hundreds of thousands of pounds lobbying and getting senior MPs, ex-MPs, and on their side ready, just to try and maintain some level of their market share that they have got, and to try and then go back to what triggered the most controversial problems in gambling harm within the known history, that the crack cocaine of gambling back on the high street would be, as Greg said, a brazen mistake. And that's somewhere that the Gambling Commission, the government and social justice would say, no, this was a massive mistake. What are you doing? But it's a watching brief we have to keep an eye on, because it was only the stake reduction that killed B2s and they transformed to B3s. If there is a chance that that stake reduction comes back up at some time in the future, then it's a watching brief we need to be clear on. But I think stake limits is a key thing going forward.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, James. And every contact that I have with the bookmakers through the BGC, this, and I've asked the question directly, and it's been, no, this is not something that we're going to focus on. And you know, they're very clever political brains at the top of the BGC now, and they would, if they were on this call, be nodding furiously in agreement with the comments that both Greg and James have just made. I'm sure I just cannot see this being in any way, shape or form, a threat. Yeah. But we will keep a watching brief on it, of course. We do.
Can you imagine the headlines in the Daily Mail?
Yes, exactly. So look, just moving on, guys. Jonathan Loud has asked us a very good question. He says, you know, what do we sort of rate our chances of success as for our proposals, and more broadly, do we think that the Gambling Commission really understands our business?
I think that's a tough one. Do they understand our business? And it's a question we've asked them a few times recently in our fortnightly meetings that we've had, and we've raised concerns around the knowledge base that they have in the land-based market, and you know, and I think they are aware of some of the issues around that, and they go on about their funding and lack of funding and ability to enforce due to lack of funding. Etc. But I think generally the Gambling Commission and DCMS, we have put our proposals and our ideas to them, and they do, from my point of view, seem quite open to those ideas. And from what our most recent meeting with the Gambling Commission said was that they are it's quite fashionable for regulators to deliver in this way. I have this flexible approach where they can change rules more easily than it being laid down in primary legislation. So I think there's, whether we get exactly what we want, I don't know, but I think there's a good opportunity for us now to get these type of changes put in place. You know, it seems to be what people are looking to do with regulators, and I think it gives them the opportunity to make the changes they want to make. I mean, we just need to see really and keep up the lobbying. I think the fact that we've got John Whittingdale just come in as the DCMS minister responsible for gambling will help. I think there's a bit more of an open door there to push on. We know him well. He's my MP, which is also quite handy. So we are looking to get a one-to-one meeting with him, which hopefully we'll get in the next couple of weeks. And I think if we can get our views across to him and our view and our approach, I think he will definitely take an understanding from that, and that will help us moving forward.
I think that's very, very true, Greg. And you know, I think we all welcome the appointment of John to the role. No disrespect to Nigel Huddleston, James. I mean, we've met him on numerous occasions. Nice guy. But I was going to ask you whether you agree with me that if, and it's not even the right expression, but one of the things that has happened, let's put it this way, during the COVID-19 crisis is that the opportunities that we have had to communicate directly with very, very senior people, both at DCMS and at the Commission, has grown quite significantly. And I think the relationship as a result has got better, and their understanding's got better.
Yes, I would agree. And I would say both at DCMS and Gambling Commission that the relationship has improved. But it's also given us the opportunity to be quite frank with them, John. And you know me, sometimes I see you cringe when I'm probably very frank with them. But I think there's no point to beat about the bush. You've got to get your points across. And just coming back to Jonathan's question, is that yeah, I think there's a better understanding and a greater understanding. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's getting there. We've arranged AGC visits directly. You'll be aware with Steve Ambrose, we had Neil MacArthur into a couple of AGCs in the Midlands. He was very impressed. He understands it. And I think it comes back down to, do we want a relationship of confrontation or engagement? We had a period in the past where our relationship with the Commission was very much confrontational, and that didn't get us anywhere. So, you know, we have to engage with these people. We have to state the facts, give the evidence, and work with them so they can understand. You know, this isn't an organisation that exists on data, and they have to justify their existence. So there have been some frustrating conversations with them, but I think there's also been some light bulb moments as well, where they're starting to see stuff. They're under incredibly more pressure than they were before. We've seen IDS, for instance, is calling them to be scrapped and all of this sort of stuff. And they have made a few errors. They've got funding issues. And really, we need to try and help them to help ourselves.
Definitely.
That's the best way. So I think that I would certainly hope that the period of the engagement we've had continues and continues to improve, so we can have open and honest conversations with them and allay some of the concerns.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Let's turn to single site operating now. I've got a couple of questions that have come in on that. Jason Jarrett has just asked us about our review, whether when we're looking to up the entitlement in clubs to 4, as we are, is that to include all types of category B machine, or are we sticking with the current kind of 1B3? I believe that if we're going to address this particular part of the Act, we should be looking to provide freedom of choice to operators and customers to provide what it is that they want. But I'm interested in your view on that, Greg.
So I think for Club B4 machines, definitely, yeah, 100%. The B3A, the status of the B3A machine, I think, is a little bit different because it's actually a lottery machine represented in a fruit machine, isn't it? And it conforms differently to
Yes.
legislation. So I wouldn't like to answer that directly, because I think it's a tough one, and I don't know the status of the B3A machine in general, and how, because obviously it's exempt from VAT and MGD, isn't it?
Yes.
And I wouldn't want to say yes, we should push for that, and we see a proliferation of these products on the high street, and then they get looked into, or on in the clubs, let's say. So I think if we were to include that explicitly, we would need to have a proper conversation about it, and get Chris Haley involved, because I know he was involved in the original conversations around the B3A machine. So I would tread a bit more carefully around the B3A machine, just because of its status, really.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that question, Jason. That's really, really interesting. And what we'll do is we will take that away and have a little bit of a deeper dive into potentially some of the consequences of allowing a sort of a free market, as it were, in category B3, B3A and B4 for the club market, and come up with a position which we can include in our document one way or the other. But I'll be very happy to talk to you, as I'm sure Greg would be, sort of offline, just to discuss that a little bit further. Yeah,
I mean, Jason's asking in his question, I think, to go from 1 to 2 B3A machines. Yeah. So yeah, I think we just need to be a bit more careful around that.
Thank you. And Dawn has asked, Dawn Clark from M&B, do we have any evidence which demonstrates that the permit fees that we pay for machines is actually generating a profit for local councils? Dawn, I don't have any evidence on that, and my understanding is that the legislation is fairly explicit in requiring fees merely to cover the costs of administration. Whether or not that's true, I just don't know. But at £50 a pop, I doubt that local councils are making much money on it. I think they probably, like us, just see this as a bit of an unnecessary bureaucratic burden, and I'm hoping they're going to support the changes that we've proposed.
Yeah.
Jonathan's come back just in the Q&A, if we may, James, just on this point about the Gambling Commission and the government on their understanding the machine. He's just wondering if we needed perhaps to do more to educate them, and if so, what would you think we could do perhaps to help them understand our business?
I think we're already going a long way, and we would be doing more if it wasn't for COVID. You know, and even through that and lockdown and staff on furlough. So it's an unfortunate hiatus in building that relationship. But I think there is, even, you know, I'm just coming to the end of my 2-year tenure, but the first year where there was no COVID, we had lots of engagement with the Commission and DCMS. And when we started on the Category D stickers for restricting under 16s, unless accompanied by an adult, and both DCMS and the Commission were supporters of that and encouraged that, and it was an example of how we worked with them to follow the precautionary principle. You know, there was no evidence of harm, but let's reassure people that in this current climate that's a febrile atmosphere against all gambling, that there's no problem here. And that was a classic example of working with those departments. And you've all seen the feedback and comments from key people in DCMS supporting this, and also in the Gambling Commission. And I think that's a prime example for it, but we shouldn't rest on our laurels. We need to continue to do more. The subject of electronic and choice of payment method is key, and we're currently working on that across the sector, and people are becoming more understanding of that. So I think it's a continuing process, really, and I'm sure it's one that Greg will keep on.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jonathan, I think, you know, it's part of the role of bacta just to constantly show and tell our industry to stakeholders that have some influence over the decisions that get taken and affect our businesses. And you're just constantly doing that, finding new ways of doing it, reminding them of, you know, PR, all of that stuff, the stuff that we do. We just have to keep doing it to a level of intensity that our resources allow. I was funny you were talking just there, James. I remember we got Neil MacArthur out, didn't we, in terms of trying to get him to understand the business when he first became chief executive of bacta, and he did chief executive of bacta, chief executive of the Gambling Commission. He did 2 days on the pier in Weston-super-Mare,
Right.
And you may recall this at the convention as well. He said he had his eye opened, and the thing that I remember him saying, one, that he wasn't particularly a fan of emptying 2p's into buckets and carrying them around.
At 6 o'clock in the morning, yes.
6 o'clock in the morning.
Turn up for that, did he?
He didn't like that very much. But what he did say, which I thought it's kind of like I was surprised he said it, but on the other hand, I was pleased he said it, was that it was the dedication of the staff to customer service. You know, and we kind of go, well, what do you expect? But for him, that was a real eye-opener. So that's a really good way. And the more we can show, it's a really good way of showing what we're all about.
No, I agree. It's a prime example of that. And obviously with COVID, we would have done more. We'd started to do that series of engagement and get other lower officials in the commission into different premises so they could understand it. And like you say, meet with the staff. And I recall Neil's, you know, very positive feedback from those early experiences. And you know, there's only a certain amount of data you can quantify on paper or in a spreadsheet. What you can't quantify is as he commented, he was, I think he made a comment of working in the prize shop and serving customers with redemption tickets and seeing how much fun and enjoyment it was for the families. So that's a prime example of where we can, you know, reiterate our message and they get to say, yeah, I get it. And also, again, just on that song, you know, the MP engagement we had in that first year with Tickets to Wishes and getting that out so they can actually see what is going on. We had a similar conversation, you remember, on Brighton Pier with one gentleman who was a representative of the Bishop of St Albans, and he was concerned about Category D, but he didn't know what a Category D machine was, and he'd never been in an amusement arcade before. But when he came in with us to the pier, and then he was just like, oh, so this is what it's all about. And at the time, it's incredibly frustrating, but it just goes to show you the path we have to follow. It's education, engagement.
Most definitely. I mean, I likewise, James. You said he was working for the Bishop of St Albans, who also, if you remember, when we appeared before the House of Lords Select Committee on gambling in 2019, he was surprised that children were not allowed into high street adult gaming centres. He went,
There's a number of outdated approaches, and when we need to do more. So engagement is key. And the same for the pubs and clubs market, everything like that. You know, the revenue from the pubs and clubs, and we're talking about increasing the entitlement, etc., is key to the survival of many of these venues, especially pubs and community clubs, working men clubs, private members clubs. We all know that the revenue from the machines keeps them above float. These are hubs of the community, and the MPs and the other politicians, they know this. They know this. I was at the Con Club the other day and had lunch, you know. So I think we have to push all aspects of the sector, and engage them.
Yeah, great. Well, as we come towards the end of the webinar, I do want to have a brief conversation about Category Ds. But before we do, guys, I just want to pick up on a comment that Chris Haley has posted in relation to the B3, B3A subject that we were discussing a few minutes ago, and just making the point, I think Greg made this point anyway, about the being wary about questioning the status or raising the status of B3A because of the benefits that we derive from that being free of MGD and VAT. So we'll most definitely factor that into the conversation we have after this on that particular suggestion, Chris, no doubt about that. There's a lot to think about, I think. Guys, can I just now turn to Category Ds, because clearly a lot of members, certainly in Division 1, obviously have been very concerned about the debate around that. We've spoken about it a lot over the course of the past 2 years. We've taken the very bold step of saying about cash reel-based Cat Ds, no under 18s allowed to play them from March the 31st. The questions in the gambling review note that particular decision was taken, but asks questions about whether there are any structural features within the types of reel-based Category D machines that we find in seaside arcades that I suppose you could say should give the government any cause for concern. James, I mean, you've been party to so many of these discussions around Cat D with government. Do you see any threat in that, or do you think they're just kind of asking the question because it's an issue that's been raised at the APPG, for example?
I don't want to sound complacent, because you never know what they're likely to come out with. But I would say the amount of conversations and engagement we have during this process, there was never any evidence of harm before in the 50 or so years these products have been available. And it's only come to light in recent years because of the prolific rise in other sectors of gambling. And if you recall, one of the problems with the FOB-T stake is that at the time they deflected and say, we're not the people that cause harm, it's those children that let, those people that let children play fruit machines at the seaside. And that was an opportunity to deflect. So there's 2 points that really, that's been a weak point in our responses, is that comments from experienced comments from problem gamblers will sometimes say, my problem started when I was a kid playing in the seaside arcades. And when they're talking to people, that's a powerful effect, and it gets some sort of link, although there's no evidence. And even on the APPG I went on in September, where we got a bit of a rough service, even there, some of the so-called experts said it was dangerous to link such anecdotal evidence as what you did with the youngster, but nevertheless, it's there. And the comment came up when you and I met Tracy Crouch 2 years ago. She said, you know, a lot of people said that. And at the time, I thought we were able to to deal with that answer quite well. And we've said that there was a different moment in time and machines were more prevalent. There was no online gambling, there was no mobile phone, there was in chips and takeaways. So the majority of the population first encounter with a gambling machine would have been a machine. So it's not unreasonable to say that, but it wasn't the root of their problems, and there's no evidence to suggest that. And the second problem was that this old adage that we were the only country in the world that allowed children to play fruit machines. And again, there's never been any evidence to say there was any harm, but you can't, what I've learned is, painfully, that you can't just keep sticking your fingers in your ear. There isn't. And it comes back to that engagement and working with my predecessor, Gabby, and Carolyn Harris, as you know, we come up with the 16 sticker initially to allay these concerns, working with comments from the Commission and other comments that Neil MacArthur had previously made about Category D games, Rainbow Riches being available on Category D, Category C and B3, and that we had to distance ourselves from this and to say, look, we know children are not playing these machines, they're not attracted to these machines, so why would you label yourself with a problem of we are the only children in the world, only country in the world that lets children play these machines when they're not doing it? Why would you do that? So we engage with the members and EGM, we explain the full situation and the changing times, and they got it. And I'm pleased to say they supported it, and it was part of an ongoing campaign. That was, again, during COVID, problem gambling, it's been amplified with online issues. And we always said that we would then review the 16 sticker to go to 18 as and when the lottery did. And then obviously later at the back end of last year, that certainly started to go that way. And we could see that this was the right thing to do. And also regards deflection as we head into the gambling review, I formed an opinion, and I think it was shared by many others when it was discussed, that we don't need to allow the bookies the same opportunity to deflect as they did before with FOB-Ts to us, that we are the root of all harm, when in fact we're not. So let's draw ourselves out of that target area altogether, keep the wider elements of Category D out of the spotlight altogether because there is no evidence of harm. Let's follow the precautionary principle and let's go to 18 and say that the machines still stay on the main floor. They're not in a separate area. Parents can still play them with a child by their side. The child's not playing it, the adult's playing it, and it's following the precautionary principle. But then it's probably easier to administer because you can clearly identify whether somebody's 18 or not, and we shouldn't be allowing them to play a Category D fruit machine for cash. That's where all the concerns are these machines a gateway to gambling harm? Well, no, they're not. And we've put a measure in place and we're acting responsibly and we're moving forward on that basis. And I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, thanks, James. I mean, I absolutely 100% share that view. And as I mentioned at the very outset of this webinar, we've put oodles of evidence into our submission, just because that's what this is a call for evidence, oodles of evidence to show that what you said is actually supported by robust academic evidence. And I would be speechless actually on the basis of what we know, the evidence that's out there, if further measures were introduced. But as you say, we can't be complacent, and we have to make sure that is absolutely fully understood by everybody.
John, if I just come back, what's key through this process, and you would always say that you can't prove a negative, and you got sick of saying you can't prove a negative, but nobody was listening. We can't prove there isn't any evidence of harm because there's no harm. It's a vicious circle. But the only thing then to do was to say, okay, let's follow the precautionary principle and introduce such a measure. And it allays all those concerns. So yeah, it's the right thing to do. Playing Category Ds in a family seaside arcade, whatever the game, whether it be a penny falls, a fruit machine for cash with your parents, these are licensed venues, there are LCCP measures to follow, no children during school hours, no children in school uniform. This is a family entertainment environment in much the same way as the children sit down and watch Tipping Point on the television, or they visit the church fete or the village fete and they play tombola. So these are all in the same classification, and the government and most people know this and understand it. And if you ask them, they say, well, this is just fun. It's not gambling. What they're sick of is the advertising on the television and football sponsorship. You can't put a television on your phone on with getting a gambling ad. That's what people are absolutely sick to death of, you know. And that what they're trying to do is what we said is we need to encourage legislation to be more flexible to fit for the modern age. So I just see as Brad just put up about loot boxes.
Yeah.
We've raised loot boxes many times before, and we've also raised these phone-in competitions or text in at £2 a stake sort of thing, you know. So
up on loot boxes, James, I think that's a perfect example of where the Act isn't flexible enough.
exactly.
To pick things up, which is what we're asking for changes to be brought in for. So, you know, it kind of works around that as well. It backs up that point in itself.
Absolutely. Look, thanks very much, guys. We're bang on 11:30, so we've come. I appreciate there's a couple of questions that we haven't been able to answer, but this is 11:30. We're going to have to close the webinar. We'll pick up all of that offline afterwards. I just want to remind members that we do have another webinar next Thursday, same time, same place, wherever you are, 10:30, and this will be with the 4 division chairman, and we'll be talking about reopening our business on May the 17th and hopefully April the 12th for AGCs, but we'll focus in on all of that next week. So book your slot. We'll send the link out very, very shortly. Finally, I just want to thank both Greg and James for being on the call this morning and taking those questions and giving everybody an opportunity to hear your thoughts. It's been really good this morning. I mean, it's flown by this hour, I have to say. I mean, it just feels like I've switched it on. It's really flown by. There's so much to discuss. Seems to be a lot of support for our approach, which is good. We'll take that into National Council next week. And before I go, I just wanted to say to members on the call that this is probably the last time you will see James in an all-member at an all-member function, because he's about to be sent off into the sunset on the 17th of March when Greg gets elected as the president. No, we will see plenty more of James. He doesn't get off that lightly. But I just wanted to publicly say,
John, I think it's a case of you're not going to get off that lightly, not me.
I want to say a massive thanks to James and just repeat what I did at the convention. Been a fantastic president, and a dedication to the cause, dedication to bacta has been quite astounding and incredible. And I can see all the members virtually clapping in their offices and back rooms as I say that. So that's where we will finish. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I'll see you all very, very soon, hopefully, and it won't be too long before that happens in 3D. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for your kind words.
Yes.